Simple is always best, especially in the case of marketing. But I think just in life, when I'm feeling very overwhelmed, when I'm like, oh, I just don't know where to go, what to do, or, whatever is happening, I just kind of get back into getting grounded a little bit and saying, how do I start small? How do I simplify this? How do I make this less overwhelming or less complex?
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. My next guest has a mission that I think a lot of us in the marketing and comms field should have, to help people really understand their vision to execution and not be overtaken by shiny object syndrome, which is all too easy these days with everything people are putting on the internet. So Caroline Crawford, Cultiveight Communications, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, we were just talking about your journey living in LA, Florida, New York. I'd love to talk about your background a little bit. Did you start out wanting to go into communications and marketing?
Yeah, in a sense. In a way, I fell into it, but I originally went to school for journalism. So I was always fascinated by the production of things, broadcast journalism, and all the things. And I quickly learned I did not want to be a journalist. And so at that point, I was like, I don't really know. How do I use my skills? I was good at writing. I loved the process of journalism in the sense of, finding the story, finding the angle, how to make things kind of feel relevant and getting to like that core. And I don't know how it happened because I feel like it sort of just all fell into place where I got an internship in social media, which was very new at the time. I'm talking like 2010. And so like Instagram had just basically started, I think. I forget exactly the dates there, but yeah. And it was like one of those things where I just loved it. So I loved marketing, and every time like an opportunity just kept presenting itself and kept me going. And now 14 years later, here I am.
Wow, amazing. And you went through a few different positions, ranking up.
Well, it was interesting when I looked back, and I didn't realize this until right before I started Cultiveight, because I was always at companies that had limited marketing resources in-house. It doesn't matter the size of the company. I was at varying sizes. The sizes ranged in terms of like employee counts and all of the things. But I, for some reason, was always one of a few, a lot of the times the single marketing team, whatever that looked like. And one of the companies I was in, actually in LA, I was there for a little under 4 years, and they grew tremendously and in such a short amount of time, but the marketing team did not. And one, again, like looking back, obviously in the time, I was like, what is happening? Oh my gosh, how it was like drinking from a fire hose kind of thing. But looking back, I was like, I needed those. It helped me see marketing from all angles. It helped me also see gaps in the way that people outside of marketing viewed marketing. There were a lot of challenges around that. And then also too, like how marketing varied so much from person to person. And when I left, I moved back east, I realized the same patterns were kind of happening in the organizations. And so that's kind of what led to Cultiveight. I saw a gap in the way marketing support was delivered. It was very difficult to find support that truly made the internal team feel supported. And it was very hard to navigate the differing viewpoints and opinions and stressors and priorities and all the things from the internal team outside of marketing. So I felt like I had this really unique viewpoint and angle around the role marketing plays and the needs that actually are required, because the traditional ways of marketing or getting marketing support are agencies, freelancers, hiring in-house. Those all have gaps in them. And so Cultiveight, the way that we're built, is meant to be complementary to those traditional ways, and fill in the gaps. But also, if let's just say we're not using the traditional ways, it can still supply the marketing teams. Because I think ever since I started in marketing 14 years ago, marketing teams and just the way it looks like inside of an organization looks so different now, especially now with tighter budgets, businesses really struggling across the board. Doesn't matter the industry, doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Marketing teams just look very different and resources are different. And so I think they look more kind of about how I experienced it over the years versus, people actually investing more into
Right.
marketing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny because that is one of the first things people cut, but
Yep.
you need marketing to succeed as a business, to get word out, to start that customer funnel and journey, and so many things that people forget about. So, like you, I'm a big believer in integrated marketing strategies and really taking a whole and holistic look at your business, your goals, and making sure each piece adds another layer to that brand story. What was it like going from working in businesses that, again, had maybe varying budgets, small budgets, the team didn't grow even when the company grew, to going out on your own and starting a business?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the biggest, the marketing part was easy in the sense of working when I got clients, I knew what to do. I just knew because I had done it so many times over and over and over again. So that part was easy because I was working with clients, a lot of them, because that just seemingly was the magnet I sort of had, was a lot of them really unsure about marketing, really taking a leap and or have been burned before. And so that was a little bit new to navigate. Not that it was new because I had worked it with some interesting teams, to put it lightly. So I was used to people questioning marketing or questioning why are we doing this or whatever. And I was always very good at navigating that, I think, because I explain as I go, and the people I work with or have worked with over the years know like I'm very intentional and things like that. But I think it was definitely a different realization when they're investing in Cultiveight and they're taking a leap on me, and what role do I play there? So that was a huge adjustment for me to realize like, whoa, like versus getting hired and you're kind of like, well, you're stuck with me or you're not, you know what I mean? Even though I'm the type of person when I'm like, oh my God, will I always get fired? That type of high achiever mindset status, I guess. But I definitely was very much, I did not take it lightly that they were making an investment in me and Cultivate essentially. And that was a huge adjustment for me, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then you kind of have to be everybody in your business when you're starting out. So that can
Yes.
be also a challenge. And that I think is where part of shiny object syndrome comes in. I know when I was starting my last business, even I, as a publicist, a marketing person, a brand marketing person, and strategist, I still fell prey to some of those shiny objects of like, oh,
For
AI,
sure.
or like, let me go through this course, or let me see what the latest trends are for PR, and I'm going to take this course, or
Yep.
maybe you go down this road, and just because something worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I'd love to hear
100%.
about some of your experiences, the things that you've seen and that you're currently still seeing that
Yeah.
people should be watching out for and maybe hesitating before they, decide, oh my gosh, this is a limited time offer. I need to press pay right now.
Yeah. I love this question because it's so important. And to share your experience, I also, even though I'm a marketer, you still get caught up in the noise, especially when you are feeling, I don't know about you, but I'm a solo business owner and I like when you're just doing it on your own, you're just like, am I doing this right? What's happened? Like, it's just the constant noise, especially when you're in a vulnerable place, when you're having maybe a day like, what am I doing? What's happening here? You know what I mean? Because all founders, I think, do. But so I share in that experience where it's just so easy to get caught up in the noise. And that's what it is. It's all noise. And it's not to, and I say this not to knock certain tactics down, certain people doing things a certain way, but the shiny object syndrome comes when you're not rooted in intention and strategy. And strategy is really just building that intention, truthfully. And then the rest is tactics. The rest is how do we really, what shifts can we make? How do we want to go about this and things like that. But the strategy piece is where I think people skip the step, even though, and I think also too, they don't know what's actually included in a strategy to a certain degree. So that's been something that's interesting because I know, right, like people, I know fellow marketers who, sell strategies and things like that, but then the client gets it and they're like, well, what do I do from here? And I can understand that they're paying a lot for the strategy, but the strategy will evolve once it's in implementation as well. So I think that's where the gap is. However, when you have the strategy piece, again, it's just that anchor that tells you, what are we doing with marketing and why? What is the expectation that we can sort of appropriately predict will happen? Again, you never know until everything's in execution, but you're making educated, informed decisions and educated, quote unquote, guesses to a degree because you just never know. Maybe it's something and how, like some of the shifts that I provide or recommendations I provide to particularly to the founders, but also to clients, it's like instead of just saying like this happened last week, instead of just saying join us, say, want to know more, whatever the shift was. I forget exactly the particular wording, but it's something so small. And then later that day, she says, I've never gotten so many responses from my story, right? So it's like there are little tactical shifts that you don't know until you try them. However, again, going back to the strategy and that anchor, it's understanding what are your goals, what comes first, what is the most important thing. And I think this is where people get tripped up because they want it all and they want it all right now.
Yeah.
And I think you do have to prioritize effectively. And so for some people, and also understand how certain marketing activities, what role do they play? So press plays a different role. You may not get a direct sale from press, but so if your goal is to get sales right now, like yesterday, press is going to take a while. And so it's things like that to really understand. And I use that as one example, but I think that's where there's a lack of education around the role certain parts of marketing play for certain businesses and how it stacks up to the business objectives. And I think that's where, again, getting rooted in that strategy and understanding like our business goals are this. We really need to see some changes around, let's just say, leads. Well, if you want more leads, you have to do more lead generating activities. What are those lead generating activities options? And this is, again, where you can get into the tactical components of, well, let's create a downloadable resource. Let's host a webinar. Let's do X, Y, and Z, whatever that looks like. And that's your focus for the next, again, 90 days, 60 days, however long you want to try that. So that's kind of how I sort of engineer it. But it does come back to kind of really the business strategy stacked up against the marketing strategy.
100%. And when I first started podcasting a little bit over 6 years ago, I was doing it for clients who are PR clients. And they knew that I had a background in, I'd had a little radio show and some other things. And so they were like, yeah, produce it, be the host. I'm also the one finding all the people to interview primarily. So I ended up doing a lot of work. And then what I found is they didn't really have the budget to sustain it, but they also, I'm like, here's graphics, here's video, here's the episode, here's a blog post, here's all this material. But they weren't utilizing any of that material. So I wanted to ask, because you work with different clients in different ways, do you ever come across those situations where you're providing your input, the strategy and tactics that they need, but then there's still a disconnect and the team isn't really executing those and implementing the way that they should to see the results that they would get if they followed the information, and the help that you're giving?
Yeah, all the time. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges I've seen when businesses are having challenges and they've already invested in things. That is the number one reason why it doesn't really work out. Usually, sometimes it's like, it's just not applicable or whatever, right? But like usually they don't, it's like there is a breakdown in how they can maintain the application. So, but here's the thing. I think a lot of the times, and like they won't read a guide. Like they're not going to sit down and read the guides that you give. Like we had a client where, we set up so many systems, so many structures, so many guides, all the things. And it took a really long time for them to actually make room for it in their work mindset or in their calendar or whatever that was. And so I think for things like that, I think this is another thing with when it coming back to the shiny object syndrome, to what you said, because you also said, like, they may not have the budget to like sustain it or keep that going. It's what are the resources that you have available right now to execute? What kind of baseline can you get off the ground that you can manage no matter what, you can sustain no matter what? And then you scale from there. That's how marketing grows, is you're kind of just increasing and diversifying and building up from there. Obviously, sometimes you're making pivots and there's other things that may be happening, but you do ultimately have establish a baseline that you can kind of keep going. And I think what's going to give you where you figure out how to invest is understanding what is actually going to be sustainable. And I think this is partly on the business leader's job to know what is actually realistic. Am I going to be the one posting on Instagram as the business leader, and this is just one example. If I am, what do I need to make that feel easier and less daunting? And I would say consistency is a huge issue with a lot of businesses. This is across sport, doesn't matter the size. It's always comes down to consistency because they don't set up the resources appropriately. So what I have done and what I highly recommend is setting up certain structures, whether that's a structure within certain systems like project management systems that can be automated, whether that's you take one day a month and you're batching things, you take, you know what I mean, whatever that looks like. And it will vary based off of the person. But I think that's ultimately how it needs to be done. But if you're not paying someone or investing in someone to sustain it on your behalf, you have to make changes to get it done. There's no magic bullet, unfortunately. And I see that often. But that's where I go back to, well, what are your systems clogging your calendar, your mind? Like, what are the things happening? So one example is I have a client who she has a podcast, and that's where she's put her priority to execute on. However, and it takes so much of her time, and she was doing it week to week, essentially. And everything else to her business kind of fell to the wayside. She wasn't as proactive in other activities. So I said, okay, we need to audit your podcast production process. Where can we clean that up so it feels a little less daunting? And then also, where can you fit in batching? And so I said, your podcast is launching in X weeks. You have X amount of episodes. Batch these now. So that way you're already out of the game. Then set up a schedule where you're doing 2 podcasts, setting up the 2 podcast episodes one week, and you're not up against the wire every time. Because when you're doing things week to week or day to day, you're like, oh my God, I have no time. And so when you feel ahead of the game, you feel like you have just more space. So that's something I highly recommend, is just auditing your current processes to make space and creating structures around it.
Oh, so important. Yeah. When I started this podcast, I did a few episodes, and then I had to do, and then I actually had to work in my business and work for my clients. But then once I started being really consistent and doing exactly that, batching episodes, setting up really great systems, hiring an external team in the Philippines to help me with a lot of it, that's where I saw growth. And that's where I saw that I had something, right? But if you don't set up systems, whether it's for a podcast or other areas of your business, it's eventually there's going to be something that breaks down. And
100%.
It's worth the investment for your time back, right? Yeah,
Totally.
you're completely preaching to the choir. And I always recommend, if somebody tells me they want to start a podcast, I'm like, make sure you have, like, if you're doing a weekly podcast, 8 to 12 episodes completed before you launch. So that way, if something comes up, you have a little bit of breathing time. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I'm a big believer and even too, strategically planning just any of your marketing activities, because again, then it just like time just catches up to you. And it's a problem that I see time and time again, and other people see it too. And, the more you know what's coming up, the more you can think smarter, not harder, work smarter, not harder, think in advance, things like that, where, okay, for the next 3 months, here's my outline of things. You don't have to have every answer or every question answered right away. But like, I know I'm going to want to do X, Y, and Z. Let me set up certain things to like not have that be such a daunting task when it comes around the corner.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, two other things that I think of with about shiny object syndrome is TikTok trends or other trends that people see. They're like, oh, I have to get involved with that right now. And it can be hard to pull people back sometimes because you're like, is your company aligned with that trend? Is that something people would expect to see with you? Does it make sense? And then the other one, of course, is AI, which are great tools. I'm a huge proponent for using them as tools, but I think sometimes people get really excited about them and they're like, oh, well, I don't need this employee or that employee. I can just use AI for everything. Well, you still need the strategy. You still need the person behind it to think creatively, to be the strategy, to make sure everything's being executed appropriately, to make sure that the input into AI is getting the output that you want. There's so many factors that still go into that. So have you seen a lot of those two items happen?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I would say 100%. I think going to the first part of your question of around TikTok, let's just say, right? Or like, is this a strategy or I need to go on this trend to what you said it, right? Is this aligned with your business? Does this, and again, go back to the strategy. Does this align with my goals? Is this where my audience hangs out? How do they make buying decisions from it, right? Like this is how like understanding the different channels or initiatives with marketing and the impact that they have or the role that they play is going to be really helpful because it's going to help you make an informed decision around, well, and I know this isn't entirely true, but for the sake of this example, right? People are just kind of scrolling through TikTok. I don't think they're going to make a buying decision on a high ticket offer, right? Through TikTok, right? So TikTok's going to play a role in my brand awareness instead of sales, right? Like that, just to like provide that kind of tangible example. How do I want to leverage this channel? One is my audience on TikTok, first of all. And also two, are they actually consuming it? Whereas like LinkedIn, they're way more about making connections and that kind of engagement. It's two different dynamics. So knowing the channels, how does it stack up to your goals, to your audience, to your business? And then again, like, what is the behavior that they're looking at? So that's one way to approach it. When it comes to tactics and algorithms changing and people saying you need to do this, to an extent, it applies, but never, I would say, if it does not feel aligned for your brand overall, do not do it. If you're forcing yourself to do something, you're never going to stick with it. And I think that's where a lot of the pitfalls come is like, you may see a little bit of a change in one area, but everything changes so rapidly that it's not going to last for so long. So I would say those are my thoughts on the TikTok portion of the question. But when it comes to AI, I think that AI has been a wonderful tool. I love using it. It helps give me a leg up when I'm like, oh, my brain, or I'm feeling overwhelmed about something. It can help me organize thoughts. But to what you're saying, you do need someone who knows the nuances of what you're trying to accomplish, the business. And it doesn't matter how much you populate AI, it's going to spit back out generic stuff. It's because it's generalizing and it's going off of whatever information that you give it. And so again, it's a wonderful tool to give a leg up, but you have to have people in place to infuse a level of tone that actually feels human and real and on brand, but also to make sure that like you're not overlooking nuances or things that could be really helpful. And that's where I see the breakdown in AI so much, is that it all starts to sound the same. It doesn't do the best job at really infusing your brand's personality or what's unique to your brand. It doesn't do the best job about taking the strategy and like really making it impactful. It just provides you with kind of good legwork and a good foundation to work from, but like you have to fill it in with nuance. You have to take a look and say, you know what? I feel like it's missing something. I think we need to add in more about our brand story or whatever that looks like, things that it couldn't possibly really know and really know how to infuse.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to see if you would be willing to share one of your client stories with us where they executed and they had that aha moment of like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We wish we'd done this sooner.
Oh, yes. I am very proud to say that that actually happens a pretty good amount. It's like in the sense of because, and I think too, it's because at least the way I approach it, and I think other marketers do too, and is that it really needs to be feasible. I'm not coming to you saying you need to do X, Y, and Z, and this is exactly how you should do it, and not taking you into account and the people in your team into account. And so when I do that, that's when it can be executed, assuming that they're buying. Sometimes it's really like they're just not buying in and it is what it is. But I had one client in particular where when she came to me, she was really low on marketing. She was like, I'm at my wit's end. She could like, and she was like, I guess had to invest, I don't know how much, but she had invested in other coaches, courses, brand strategists, whatever it was prior to meeting with me, and nothing was working. And she had her marketing, she was on every channel. She had email, articles, Twitter at the time, now X, Instagram, YouTube, all of the things in other communities, all the things. She was just burnt out. She's like, nothing is working. I'm doing what I'm told to do. I'm on these channels. She just didn't know. And I was asking her, what do you like to do? Like kind of basic questions, at least in my mind. But she was like, stop asking me what I like to do. Just tell me what to do. And I actually had to pause our session and say, you're here because you've only listened to what other people are telling you to do without actually applying what they are saying to what works for you or to what feels right for your brand or to, just kind of copy paste to a T, which one is very exhausting. I struggle with that because I'm a perfectionist. So I'm like, am I doing this exactly right? I'm just not built for that. But so finally, she sort of softened up a little bit, I think, because again, she was skeptical at this point. Understandably so. I'd be pissed too. I'd be like, what the hell? I just, invested in all these things and just still nothing. And I'm tired. I'm doing everything and it never feels like enough.
Yeah.
That's the worst feeling. And I felt that as well. And so, after reviewing her strategy, quote unquote strategy, she was saying, I was like, what do you like to do? She finally revealed that she's like, I love my articles. I love writing. I love, this is something that's passion of mine. And I said, okay, we drop everything else and start from there. So I said, okay, you love your article. One, like she hated the YouTube videos. I'm like, then why are you doing that?
Right.
She was like reading from a script and it looked like it. And so it's like, why are you doing it? It's not effective. It's not comfortable for you. It's actually like pulling teeth for you. Why are you doing it? And even on like Twitter at the time, like she was, like had an automated repost. She wasn't even on it. And I was like, then why are you doing it? And so that's kind of just what I kept asking. And I actually asked that a lot with people. Why are you doing this? And I've had even when I was in-house, they'd come to me being like, we need to do this. And I'd be like, why? Like, tell me why. What do you think is really going to be beneficial here? And every time I asked, they would be like, let me come back to you. And they never did until they would hope I would forget a few months later. And I'd be like, again, why? But anyways, in this woman's case, I was like, okay, let's drop Twitter. This is my permission slip for you to drop Twitter, to drop YouTube. Email is absolutely a wonderful resource. Have to keep email, but let's shift it. Let's use the articles as your baseline. And you take that one article that you write in a month, in a week, whatever the cadence was, and you repurpose that and use it here. And then I gave her some tactics and, we really refined. And so, and at first again, it's overwhelming because you see all of this and you're like, oh my gosh. And again, I'm telling you to stop marketing essentially in her mind. And she was very overwhelmed at first and was like, how is this gonna work? Like she just didn't, like she left. I was like, I think she hates me because like she doesn't get what I'm saying or whatever. This was very, very early on in my business. And I was just like, I know what I'm giving makes sense to me. Like, but she needs to digest it. She needs to sit with it. And I told her that because again, she just really was skeptical about it. She comes back, to my surprise, she comes back a month later. I didn't prompt this. She writes me the longest positive review saying I cut my marketing efforts by at least 50% in 1 month, and I'm already seeing more engagement on my emails, on
Wow.
my social channels. I'm less burnt out. I'm doing things that I love to do, and the rest is history. And I think that was just a great example to show a true lesson in marketing, that it's not about how much you do, it's about how you do it.
Yeah.
And it's about making sure that you have intention and that you're doing things that actually make sense for you. And I'll die on a hill with that rule of thumb, essentially.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are a lot of ways that you work with people. You can have a session like you had with this woman. You can integrate into different parts of their team, do different strategies depending on what their needs are. And then you also have a membership launching. So I want to hear
Yes.
what that looks like, what that means, who's the ideal customer persona for your membership, and also overall, what kind of businesses do you like to work with?
Yes, I love this question. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about it. I'm so excited for it. The membership has actually been on my heart since I launched Cultivate, and I didn't know how to implement it. And I needed to go through the journey of that I've been on to know, because I am someone where I've been in a lot of networking groups, communities, courses, all the things, and I buy it, I never look at it.
Yeah.
Or
Guilty.
yeah, exactly. I meet great connections, but I don't have time, nor the mental time mainly, to sit on Circle, Mighty Networks, whatever the platform is, and like really take advantage of it. And sometimes you just want someone in your pocket, and you just want to be able to ask a question to make sure that you're not insane. And that's what the membership is. It's called Cultivate Connect. It's going to be launching later this month in April, that I'm so, so excited about. And essentially, it's me in your back pocket. It's basically those types of situations where a founder or small business owner can come in. They come as they are. They get what they need. And when they need it, they can jump. They don't have to be on Circle all day long to make sure that they're taking advantage, getting their money's worth. They just say, they hop on whatever calls, they submit whatever questions, they say, this is what's going on with me. I don't know, even if they don't know what to ask, because I think something I've realized is when I'm in these containers or groups, I'm like, I don't know what to ask, and I don't want to take up space. I don't want to, have kind of crickets on my posts that I'm asking, or I don't know. And this gives them the ability to get support and coming as they are without saying, I have to have this specific question, and when they just don't know and they're overwhelmed. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to. It's giving them the ability to have that marketing, that kind of high level fractional marketing support in their back pocket, but without the price tag of an advisor or consultant or an agency, to just answer questions that really are sometimes, like I said, like I've been beta testing it with some founders just thus far. And just last week, like I said, that, instead of saying join us, say want this. And I got one of her newsletters. I was like, here's how you can make this a little bit clearer. Or, oh, this was actually a little bit unclear. I think we could do it. Like, I recommend shifting it this way or whatever. And people just want guidance. They would just want to know that they're not insane and that their efforts are actually making an impact. And so, anyways, that's what it's for. It's called Cultivate Connect, launches April 2025, depending on when this episode comes out.
And is there information about that on your website?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
You can find out more at cultivateconnect.com, CULTIVEIGHT, connect.com.
Yeah. And let's talk about the name,
Yeah.
because obviously that was something I brought up before we jumped on, and then we had so much other stuff to talk about. So Cultiv, and then the number 8 spelled out. So what's the story behind the spelling of the name?
I wanted a name that had a different meaning, but didn't come off so generic. I wanted it to be a little bit unique, and also a legacy for me, in a sense. I have a big vision for Cultivate, and so I didn't want it to be like Carolyn Crawford's agency or whatever. And so out of nowhere, the word Cultivate came to mind. And over the years, the more I keep coming back to how it's so appropriate, because I'm working with a lot of founders, businesses that are really trying to just cultivate communications. And I literally mean that, and that they maybe haven't, or maybe they just don't know what to do, or they've plateaued, or whatever that looks like. And honestly, to me, marketing comes down to building connections. And how do you build connections? You communicate, all the things. Anyways, that's me getting super, super literal. But the name and the spelling, 8 is one of my favorite numbers. It's a lucky number for me. It also means prosperity. And my initials are CEC. So it kind of was a nice little package, but it's funny, I wasn't sitting down being like, how can I make sure I fit in my name or initials or something somehow? But it just wonderfully worked out in that way.
Yeah, fantastic. I also, of course, ask a final question to all of my guests, Caroline, which is, do you have a favorite mantra, quote, verse, poem, family motto, words that continue to inspire you each and every day?
That is a great question, and I never know how to answer it. The reason being is because I think it changes every day. Like, I think it's depending on your needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably something that I always go back to is less is more. Like, simple is always best, especially in the case of marketing. But I think just in life, when I'm feeling very overwhelmed, when I'm like, oh, I just don't know where to go, what to do, or, whatever is happening, I just kind of get back into getting grounded a little bit and saying, how do I start small? How do I simplify this? How do I make this less overwhelming or less complex? Sometimes that's taking my to-do list and literally write an email, whatever, something so small or basic, just to keep that simple and build momentum from there. Nice. And I stand by that in both personal and professional life. Yeah. And marketing.
Yeah. Fantastic. And of course, we will have a link to your website in the show notes. And this has been a lovely conversation. I love what you're doing. I think it's really inspiring. And I love the fact that you're offering an opportunity for people to get the help that they need and the way that they need it. So you don't have to hire, a huge team for tens and tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Obviously, you're still doing well for yourself, but you can come to a marketing expert and get precision marketing strategies and techniques depending on what your needs are.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was such a lovely conversation.
Thank you. I thought so too. And thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share a little bit of their journey and some helpful hints, tips, and tricks for you on yours. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.